On a cold morning, a weary black man stood on the edge of a busy street, clutching a sign that read only 4 haunting words. "Can I fix it for food?" Passers-by sneered. Some laughed, others turned their heads away. To them, he was just another homeless man, broken, forgotten, invisible. What they didn't know was that behind the dirt on his face, behind the torn jacket and trembling hands, lay a hidden past. A past filled with speed, glory, and the roar of engines. The man they mocked was once a name whispered with respect on racetracks around the world. The city was waking up, its rhythm fast and unforgiving. Expensive cars rolled past. People in polished shoes hurried to offices, and the world seemed too busy to notice one man sitting by the corner of a repair shop. His sign, "Can I fix it for food?" rested on his knees, his eyes scanning faces that never looked back. His clothes were worn thin, his shoes had holes that let the icy wind bite at his feet, and his hands trembled not just from hunger, but from exhaustion. Yet those hands, rough and scarred, carried stories of power, precision, and a once celebrated life. But here, on this corner, none of that mattered. To strangers, he was only a beggar. Every now and then, someone would pause, not to help, but to mock. A pair of young men chuckled cruelly, asking if he could fix their broken future. A woman crossed the street, clutching her purse tighter as if poverty itself could be contagious. Still he stayed silent, bowing his head, clutching the sign tighter. What no one knew was that years ago, this very man stood under blinding stadium lights with thousands chanting his name. He was once a legend, not of wealth or business, but of racing. On dirt tracks and polished circuits alike, he had pushed the limits of speed, fought battles at breakneck pace, and carried dreams of victory on his shoulders. But fate is cruel. One accident, one betrayal, and one wrong turn in life had stripped it all away. Now, he was here, invisible in the eyes of the world, waiting for a chance. A chance not for fame or glory, but simply to eat. And soon, that chance would arrive. In the most unexpected way. The day dragged on with a cruel rhythm. Hours blurred together as the man sat with his back against the cracked wall of the repair shop, the cardboard sign resting across his knees. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and the shadows stretched long across the street. People passed by, some glancing with curiosity, others avoiding eye contact altogether, as though looking at him was dangerous, as though poverty might be contagious. A few gave him pitying looks, but pity doesn't fill an empty stomach. No one offered food. No one offered work. His request, written in faded black marker, "Can I fix it for food?" seemed invisible. Then came the laughter. It started small. A group of teenagers rolled by on their bikes, circling like vultures. One boy with a baseball cap tipped sideways called out, "Hey, old man, what are you even gonna fix with those shaky hands? Maybe you can fix my chain if I give you the crust from my sandwich." His friends howled, their voices sharp and merciless. Another chimed in, "Nah, he'll probably eat the bike before he fixes it." The homeless man said nothing. He didn't even look up. He had grown used to the insults, but each one still landed like a stone in his chest. The fire inside him flickered weaker, but it didn't die. He couldn't let it. The teens circled a few more times, recording him with their phones before they got bored and sped away. Their laughter echoed down the street long after they disappeared. As the crowd thinned, the noise of the city filled the air again. Car horns, voices, the hum of life continuing without him. And then, with a low growl of an engine, everything shifted. A sleek midnight blue sports car pulled up to the curb. Its polished surface gleamed, catching every ray of sunlight. People turned their heads, not at the car, but at the man who stepped out. He was young, successful-looking, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed power and wealth. A golden watch shimmered on his wrist, and his shoes, spotless and shining, looked like they had never touched dirt. He exuded control, dominance. Wherever he went, people paid attention. And today, his attention locked onto the homeless man with the cardboard sign. The millionaire read it aloud softly, almost to himself. Fix it for food? His eyes narrowed with curiosity, a hint of disbelief. He glanced back at his car, which had begun sputtering during the drive, a rare imperfection in his otherwise flawless world. He smirked, then motioned to the vehicle as though throwing down a challenge. All right then, his voice carried, sharp and cold. Let's see what you can do. The crowd stirred instantly. Pedestrians slowed. Some crossed the street just to watch. Within minutes, a small audience had gathered. The whispers came first. Is he serious? One man muttered. This is gonna be a disaster, a woman laughed under her breath. Look at him. He can't even stand straight. Phones came out. Screens glowed as people pressed record, eager to capture what they believed would be a spectacular failure. They wanted humiliation, the kind that spreads quickly online. The man with the cardboard sign slowly rose to his feet. His knees trembled, his body worn and thin, but his posture shifted ever so slightly as he moved toward the car. There was something different in the way his eyes studied the machine, something sharp and deliberate. The millionaire folded his arms, waiting. The crowd leaned in. The homeless man pressed his palm against the hood. For a moment, he closed his eyes, listening, not just with his ears, but with something deeper. The soft sputter of the engine spoke to him like an old language, one he hadn't forgotten. He reached under the hood with steady hands. The crowd laughed louder now. Careful, don't break it, one man jeered. He probably doesn't even know what he's touching, another scoffed. But slowly the laughter began to die. His movements weren't random, they were precise. He adjusted a loose connection, tightened a part, checked the wiring as though he'd done it 1,000 times. Before, his hands moved with the confidence of an expert, not a beggar. The crowd's expressions shifted. Confusion replaced mockery. Phones continued recording, but now in silence. The teenagers had returned, watching closely, their earlier jeers caught in their throats. Within minutes, he stepped back. His chest rose and fell with quiet certainty. He nodded at the millionaire. Try it. The man in the suit raised an eyebrow, slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The car came to life with a roar, smooth, powerful, flawless. The engine purred like a beast reborn. Gasps erupted around the crowd, mouths dropped open. The mocking silence broke into murmurs of disbelief. The millionaire froze, hands gripping the wheel. For the first time in a long while, he was speechless. The homeless man, though, didn't bask in the victory. He only stepped back, the fire in his eyes dim but steady. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about surviving another day. Yet, in that moment, the whispers began to change. Wait, how did he do that so fast? That wasn't luck. That was skill. He knows cars. But the truth ran deeper than anyone could imagine. This wasn't just skill, this was history, this was legacy. And soon, the crowd, and the millionaire, would learn that the man they mocked wasn't just another forgotten soul on the street. He was once a legend of speed, a man whose name had echoed in stadiums filled with roaring fans. And now, fate had set the stage for the world to remember. The hum of the perfectly repaired engine still echoed in the millionaire's ears as he sat frozen in the driver's seat. The same crowd that had come to laugh now lingered in stunned silence. People leaned closer, phones still recording, their mocking grins replaced with wide-eyed disbelief. The homeless man, ragged clothes, dirt-streaked face, shoes barely held together, had just accomplished in minutes what most mechanics might take hours to solve. And he did it not with hesitation, but with a kind of intimate fluency, as though the car had simply whispered its pain to him, and he had listened. The millionaire stepped out slowly, every ounce of arrogance shaken, replaced by an unfamiliar discomfort. He circled his car once, then looked at the man as though truly seeing him for the first time. The crowd began to murmur, questions swirling through the hot afternoon air. Who is this guy? No way a homeless man just did that. Did anyone else see how fast he worked? The whispers grew louder. The man who had once been invisible was now impossible to ignore. But he didn't look at them. He didn't crave their approval, their validation. His eyes stared past them, distant, as though he were somewhere else entirely. And then from the edge of the crowd a voice rose. It was low at first, almost hesitant, but carried with a certainty that silenced the others. Wait. I know. Him. Heads turned sharply toward the speaker, an older man with weathered skin standing taller than his years. He pushed through the circle of onlookers, eyes fixed on the ragged figure before them. His lips trembled as he spoke again, louder this time. That's not just some beggar, that's Darnell Hayes. The name sliced through the air like thunder. At first, confusion rippled through the crowd. A few repeated it, testing the sound. Darnell Hayes? Others frowned, struggling to place it. And then recognition dawned on a handful of faces. Gasps followed, sharp and breathless. No, it can't be. Darnell Hayes? The racer? Are you serious? That Darnell Hayes? The homeless man's shoulders stiffened. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, not with reverence, not with weight. It was a name that once commanded arenas, that once made engines roar, and fans scream until their voices broke. It was the name of a champion, a man who had defied odds and broken barriers on the racetrack, a man whose victories had carried more than just trophies. It had carried the weight of representation. Whispers, transformed into a chorus of disbelief. People pulled out their phones, quickly searching, scrolling through images, headlines, old race clips that still lived online. And there he was, younger, stronger, in a gleaming suit, with a helmet tucked under one arm, the same sharp eyes, the same steady hands. And now the truth was undeniable. It was. The homeless man, mocked for begging with a cardboard sign, was once a racing legend who had defied racism, poverty, and all odds to stand at the top. The millionaire's jaw clenched. His smirk was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Shame, disbelief, perhaps even a flicker of respect. He stepped closer, his voice quieter, now uncertain. Is it true? He asked. You're him? The man lifted his eyes for the first time, meeting the millionaire's gaze directly. For a brief second the years melted away, and in that weary face the spark of the champion glimmered through. He didn't need to answer. The truth was written in every line, every scar, every movement of his hands that had once gripped a steering wheel at 200 miles per hour. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, as though they had just witnessed history in the making. Others whispered apologies under their breath, ashamed of the laughter they had joined in moments ago. Phones shook as people filmed, desperate to capture the living proof of redemption standing before them. And yet, through the noise, the man stood still, silent, unmoved. His expression wasn't one of triumph, but of quiet endurance. He had carried burdens heavier than humiliation, wounds deeper than mockery. Recognition didn't erase the years he had suffered, nor did it erase the struggles of countless others like him, whose names would never be remembered. But, in that single moment, something shifted. He was no longer invisible. The world that had passed him by finally stopped to look, to remember, to acknowledge. The millionaire, caught between pride and humility, extended his hand slowly, hesitantly. The gesture hung in the air, a bridge between arrogance and understanding. And as the crowd held its breath, waiting, the man's silence carried more power than any words could have. His story was not over. It was just being rediscovered. The millionaire's hand lingered in the air, trembling with hesitation as the world seemed to hold its breath. The crowd pressed closer, eager to witness what would come next. Some expected the homeless man, the once great racing champion, to grasp that hand, to accept the offer of reconciliation. Others whispered that he should turn away, that forgiveness came too easily to those who never felt the sting of humiliation. But the man did not move. His silence was louder than the noise around him, his stillness heavier than the weight of all the cameras aimed at his face. He looked at the extended hand, then at the crowd, then back at the car he had just fixed. A faint, almost imperceptible, smile touched his lips, not of joy, not of pride, but of quiet resilience. The millionaire lowered his hand, ashamed. For perhaps the first time in his life, he realized that money, power, and influence could not buy dignity. They could not erase years of pain or heal wounds carved by prejudice. He had humiliated a man who had once carried the dreams of millions, a man who had raced not only for himself but for every young black boy and girl who dared to dream in a world stacked against them. And yet here he stood, stripped of wealth, stripped of glory, mocked and forgotten. And still, his spirit had not broken. The crowd began to shift. What started as murmurs of disbelief turned into conversations about injustice. Strangers argued among themselves. How could someone of such talent, someone who had once been a hero, fall so low without the world noticing? How many like him existed, hidden in plain sight, their brilliance buried beneath poverty and prejudice? For decades, Darnell Hayes had been erased from the spotlight. When he was at the peak of his career, the whispers of racism had followed him at every turn. Sponsors dropped him for being too outspoken. Critics questioned his victories, suggesting luck instead of skill. Rivals, bitter and threatened, mocked him on and off the track, and when an accident left him injured, the very system that had profited off his success abandoned him without a second glance. What followed was a slow descent into obscurity. One opportunity after another shut in his face. One door after another closed. Until finally he was left with nothing but memories of engines roaring and crowds chanting his name. Memories that grew quieter with each passing year. Now, standing in rags before those who once would have paid to see him race. His story came rushing back like a haunting echo, and for the first time the crowd realized the uncomfortable truth. They had laughed at a man whose very existence was a testament to perseverance. The millionaire, overwhelmed with guilt, stepped forward again. This time, his tone was different. Gone was the arrogance, gone was the mocking edge. His words trembled as he asked the one question no one else dared to speak. What happened to you? The man looked up, his weary eyes glimmering with 1,000 untold stories. He did not answer in detail, for words could not fully capture the years of battles fought in silence. But the pain etched into his face was enough. Those who looked closely saw not weakness, but survival. They saw a man who had been betrayed by a world that celebrated him only when it was convenient. A hush fell over the crowd as the weight of the moment sank in. People shifted uncomfortably, grappling with the truth they could no longer ignore. They had mocked a man without knowing his story. They had laughed without considering his humanity. And then something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a young boy stepped forward, his skin dark, his eyes wide with awe. He held up a crumpled trading card, one that bore the eerie image of a younger Darnell Hayes in his racing prime. The boy's hands shook as he whispered, "My dad gave me this. He said you were the greatest." The card looked worn, edges frayed from years of being carried like a treasure. The boy's words cut deeper than any insult ever could, for in that moment Darnell realized that though the world had tried to erase him, his legacy had endured in the hearts of those who still believed. Tears glistened in the boy's eyes, and for the first time in years, Darnell allowed himself a real smile. He knelt down, his trembling hand brushing against the boy's shoulder as if passing a torch that the world could not extinguish. The crowd erupted, not in laughter this time, but in applause. Some clapped out of guilt, others out of admiration, but all felt the gravity of what they had just witnessed. Phones continued to record, but now the headlines would tell a different story. No longer would he be the faceless homeless man mocked in the street. He would be remembered once again for who he truly was, a legend, a fighter, a man who refused to be defined by his fall.